Welcome to Pet Sitter Confessional, an open and honest discussion about life as a pet sitter. Today, we're brought to you by our friends at Time to Pet and Pet Sitters International. Today's episode is also eligible for 1 CEU from PSI and NAPS, so listen to the episode, take the quiz, get the email, get the credit. What does it mean to truly care in your business? What habits, what systems can we have in place to prevent problems from coming up? Whether that's with our clients, whether that's with the pets or our team, what does it really take to prevent the oh-no's of what we do? Today, we're really excited to have Scott Black back on the show to talk about how he approaches safety and consistency in everything that he does while keeping it simple. Make sure you've got something to take notes because we dive right into this conversation. Let's get started. I think a lot of it too, Scott, is the questions about how do I handle busyness and how do I handle growing and how do I handle scaling and how do I handle staffing, all stuff. Like those are kind of the sexy questions. I think those are the ones that people like to hear and talk about. Talking about, how do I handle a slower period, or hey, is everybody else experiencing this downturn? Where like that's not fun.
I am painting this with a very broad paintbrush, and I need somewhere in our talk today, I need to put a disclaimer out there. I'm not anti-coach, and I'm not anti-scaling and growing, but our business has become so focused on the bottom line that this is where we become complacent with all the other things about running a business. Mm-hmm. I'm not anti-coach. I know there's a lot of people out there that work with Michelle or work with Janie or work with Doug or work with whoever. And that's great that there are resources there. But we can't just focus on the bottom line. When everything is about money, then we're no longer in pet care. Mm. I feel, and I'm saying this to you because I think you understand where I'm coming from. And maybe because as a solopreneur, my business is so niche that there's times that, to me, it's not about, making an extra $26 for doing a last minute visit, or, it's about the relationship sometimes. And to me, it's never been about the money. Yes, I've been profitable from day one, as profitable as I wanted to be. Not always, but I've always, been profitable. But to me, it's never been about the bottom line. It's about providing quality care and being an honest business person.
Well, so
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of dive right in there, Scott, because you talked about you mentioned that. Well, you mentioned the complacency, right? And I think like why is it that complacency comes into our business? Because I see that all the time, and from my perspective, I see businesses that should know better, have done better in the past, know better, and then kind of like they kind of get off at some point along the way. And then I don't know if it's the care or if it's the desire or drive or capacity, right, to take care of things or whatever. But like, why do you think that complacency comes in?
We get lazy, and I think a lot of times, and I will say that I am guilty of it sometimes, that if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But, sometimes we do need to make changes in our business, and whether it's policies or pricing or again, I don't take every client that comes along. Not every person is my ideal client. And for specific reasons, I've always talked about liability and safety, and, a lot of, I think complacency, falls under that category. To me, taking a job just for the money when there's too much risk involved, that's a deal breaker. It's a deal breaker for me. And I celebrated 20 years in business this past July. And believe me, I've learned a lot in 20 years. And if I can help newer sitters or newer business owners, whether they have a staff or just solo like myself, if I can help you avoid making some of the same mistakes that it took me 20 years to figure out, in your first couple of years of business, I'm proud to do that and more than happy to do that. But, you need to, again, you do what you say and say what you do. In many ways, and complacency can fall under so many categories, whether it's in the day-to-day going to a client's home, especially Monday through Friday dog walks. You have a dog 5 days a week. You go in, you do the same thing day in and day out, and the dog's happy to see you, or the dogs are happy to see you. But do you fail that client and that dog by just not adding anything to the mix? All right, come on, let's put your leash on, let's go for a walk, let's come in, it's time for your treat. It's I don't know. I like to mix things up a little bit. But it's like, I guess, when you have a kid, you get up, your kid has breakfast, they brush their teeth, they get dressed, you take them to the school bus. It's rinse and repeat. And in our industry, you can't have rinse and repeat.
Right.
Because anything can and will happen. You know that.
Yeah.
And that's where that's where I think, I don't want to say we dropped the ball, but I think we might fall a little short of raising the bar, so to speak, when it comes to repeat business. And I don't care whether it's a midday dog walk or a client that might use you twice a month because they travel for work on weekends, or have a beach house, or whatever the needs are. I have a lot of clients that are flight attendants, okay, or pilots. They do a back-to-back trip, so they need you for a few days, and it's a couple of weekends a month, and you love visiting with the dogs or the cats, but it could become very routine. Now, that said, routine is good for not stressing an animal out, but every now and again, it's nice to add a new type of enrichment, or if a client introduces a new toy or a new treat, or God forbid, a dog or cat needs to start taking medication. These are things that we also need to be aware of, that, is this something, again, I'm comfortable doing? I know there's lots of questions and things you may have, and I may have answers that, fit well for me. But I know we had kind of talked about some stuff ahead of time, and I tried to, again, paint this with a very broad paintbrush. Not so much focused on a solo business model, but, I don't have a team. I would imagine that the things that I think could impact a business would apply whether you have a team or not. I know communication is probably number one, is probably number one on the list.
Well, and I was just thinking, even so we do have a team, and I think about where has complacency crept in? And I think about, like, when Megan and I it was just her and I, and how we didn't let anything slide. Like, nothing slid. Like, if we were on problems, we were so proactive. But as the busyness kicks in, it kind of becomes easier to just be like, okay, I don't have time for that right now. Or
exactly,
I just don't have the brain capacity to deal with this again. And then the walking into visits, I know that's something that we work a lot with our staff on, Scott, because I don't care if you've done Layla 100 times, always review the notes before you go in.
Thank you.
Right? Like, you can't just walk in and assume nothing has changed.
Well,
because that's one that we see that falls down.
So here's a perfect example. Okay. And again, I'm kind of, Evelyn Wood version, but you know me, I know quite a few pet sitters, and we are all what I refer to as accountability partners. And I love that term, because there's days where someone will call me and say, "Hey, Scott, what would you do? Am I overreacting?" Or I'll do that with someone. Am I overreacting? and I hate to say it, you see it all the time on Facebook, right? In the pet sitting groups. A lot of us go on there to rant and vent, and because we all understand, what's going on. But, is that particular poster overreacting? Or are they just angry because the client, called them out on something that, it really wasn't the client's fault. It was the pet sitter's fault. Again, did someone read the notes? Maybe not, and again, consistency and communication is key. But I had a situation where someone called me and said, Scott, what would you have done in this situation? They have a team. Okay. So again, out of my wheelhouse, because I am a one-man team. But apparently there were multiple sitters, and one went in and made a comment or called the business owner and said, I don't know what to do about this cat. The cat looks really skinny. And and the business owner said, well, is the cat eating? Is the cat drinking? Cat using the litter box? Is there a lot of clumps? Is there diarrhea? Is there this? Is there that? No. Well, I didn't. And the pet sitter, I think we should call the client. Well, this pet sitter had not seen the cat in a while, the one that was there. And, again, good observation, but is it something that you need to freak the client out about? I mean, to me, that would be a wait and see. Is the cat bleeding? Is the cat this? Is the cat lethargic? No. But, having had multiple cats through the years, I know sometimes as cats get older, they have a tendency to lose a little weight and get a little leaner and saggier bellies. But if physically, if what you're seeing, and I'll credit Arden Moore. She always talks about be a mutt-giver. Look at around your surroundings and see. Again, I don't want to say there's not anything wrong with that cat, but if it's not presenting with the problem, maybe see if there's anything different at the next visit. Or at that point, do you notify the client? I mean, I'm one of those people that if you see something, say something. But hey, we're here with Fluffy, and it's been 6 months since we've been here. We noticed Fluffy looks a little thinner. Is there anything we need to know? And the client may say, oh yeah, she's lost a little bit of weight, she's getting older. But there's nothing wrong. Something like that. Or there was a post the other day about a pet sitter finding like a lump or a bump on a client's pet. And do I contact them and ruin their vacation? Well, I don't think you'd be ruining a client's vacation by saying, hey, Charlie was getting belly rubs and I noticed he had a little bit of a lump, but it feels like a fatty tumor. Now, again, I'm not a vet, but, my dog has had a lot of them and, just wanted to make you aware of it. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of the clients say, oh, yeah, we know about it, but thank you.
Yeah.
Again, communication, whether it's with the client, whether it's between the team and the business owner or the team, again, with teams, the same sitter's not going to be coming all day, every day. So you need to have that open dialogue for, whoever's coming to do the dinner visit, or documenting medications if you have a dog or cat on medication. I know I don't use software, but I would imagine there's a whole section where you can update the client and put any information into notes for the next person. Like you said, read the notes, read the, we get to the point where it's like, all right, well, I got to go give Charlie his pill, blah, 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 blah. Well, did you even notice if the pill bottle, if the prescription's been changed to a higher or lower dose than the last time? Or, if the pet owners don't, update their profiles. I think I have it a little easier because as I'm getting older and pets are getting older, I'm caring for a lot of special needs pets now. And anytime someone with a special needs pet books me, I always say, okay, hang on. Charlie was taking benazepril and he's got congestive heart failure. He's taking this, and this. Is everything still the same doses? Is he still getting this twice a day? One, and they'll say, yeah. Okay. or a diabetic animal. Hey, my last records show Fluffy's getting 1 unit twice a day. Is that still correct? Yes. I because they could have upped the dose, right? And didn't update it in your portal. And then you look at the new bottle of insulin, or you might have the old bottle of insulin, but they've just upgraded the units, and the label says give 1 unit twice a day, where now the cat's getting 2 units twice a day. I mean, again, communication is key. And I think we as business owners fail sometimes to to sorry, I have two little visitors. Uh, to take that extra step, and that leads to, I mean, again, liability. Could it lead to a trip to the vet for giving the wrong amount of medicine or not the right amount of medicine? Or, it could go in so many ways. And I realize we're all busy, but, I think I have the luxury, again, of being solo, that if I have no one to blame but myself, and if I don't communicate with the client and something goes south, I own it. I mean, I can't blame anyone, and with the team, I think the more people involved, and I've always said this when I've talked to people about insurance, I said, the more people involved, the more you expose yourself to liability. And, businesses with a team, you've got multiple people going in and out of a client's home. They've got the codes, they've got the key, they've got this, they've got that. You expose yourself. You know what I mean? And that's a whole nother complacency issue. Or an oh no issue is understanding your insurance coverage. You know, if a pet should get sick, and you've been at enough conferences and have heard David Pearsall talk about claims, and pet sitter taking a dog or a cat to the vet saying, "Oh, I'm covered for $1 million. Do what you need to do," and the vets are going, "Hot damn, we're going to run every test," and technically they're not covered for $1 million. They don't understand. They don't understand their coverage, and that's a huge financial risk to your business, because at some point you're going to end up paying out of pocket for that, if the client refuses to pay the bill. But also know your deductibles. Little things. Things get broken. I mean, I was washing a ceramic dog bowl years ago, and it slipped out of my hand and it hit the sink right at a right angle, and it cracked right in half. Oh. And I immediately went onto Amazon, ordered another one that looked just like it, and had it delivered to the client's home. And again, this was a flight attendant, and I messaged her and said, "Hey, I'm really sorry." I said, "But when you get home from your trip, you're supposed to be a bowl delivered." She goes, "Scott, you didn't have to do that. I got a cabinet full of them." I said, "Look, it happened on my watch. It was a $6 bowl. I didn't care. You know what I mean? To me, it was the right thing." But, sometimes it's cheaper to pay out of pocket, and I'm sure you've seen them in your group, about when to file an insurance claim, when not to file an insurance claim. And, depending on who you have your coverage with, I've been with the same provider for the entire length of my business of 20 years. Okay. I know there's other providers out there, but I'm very happy with my provider. But, I've never had to file a claim. Thank God. I've come close a couple times. But, anything that was minor that I may have dropped or broken. I remember going into a client's home. My first visit was a bedtime visit, and the house was dark, like no lights were left on for me. And in trying to find the wall switch, I knocked over a candlestick, which knocked over something else. And it was a cheap glass candlestick. And I took a picture of it, and I said, "Hey, I'm really sorry. Where did you get this? I'd like to replace it." They said, "Scott, it's a cheap $3 Pier 1 candlestick. It's our mistake because we didn't leave a light on for you. Don't worry about it." But I'm honest when it comes to that. It's paying out of pocket is easy when it comes to owning a mistake. And hopefully you never have to use your insurance.
I'll also add the insurance one, a place of complacency that creeps in is you never look at it again. You just kind of auto renew your insurance policy because like the insurance policy you have when you start, like, and especially if you get certain clientele where you're going into more $1 million homes or you're dealing with more high-end dog breeds or you're dealing with more stuff, all of a sudden that insurance policy that you got 5, 6, 7 years ago might not be sufficient to now cover those costs. And you're right, Scott, of like, you may have this idea of what you're covered for. Oh, another one is what services you can provide. This is one where, obviously we're small business owners, we're entrepreneurial, we're always thinking of other things we could be doing. And it's really easy to see what other people are doing in the industry and go, oh, well, I'll just do that too. Instead of going and looking first to your insurance policy, can I do adventure hikes? What would it am I covered for pet transportation? Am I covered for this kind of thing? And it takes just a little bit of research and one question to clarify that, but we don't.
Well, but in addition to that, and this is where I get into my whole safety and liability thing and a big oh no, even if you're covered for something like that, taking an adventure hike or removing, yes, we go to a client's home, we take them for a dog walk every midday, blah, 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 blah. Yes, it's their area. So we are removing the pet from the home. But if you're going to take a pet from the home, put it in the car, take it to a park, I'm not talking about a dog park, just a public park for some sort of an adventure or a different thing, you're exposing yourself to more liability. It's a strange place. There's people you don't know. There could be other pets there. I don't understand why businesses expose themselves to more liability. Yes, they want to add a service, okay, and I think that's great. But do the benefits, outweigh, or do the positives outweigh the negative when it comes to exposing yourself to liability? I'm one of those people that I don't do anything off leash. Kudos to people that do off leash pack walks and hikes, and I would never sleep at night being afraid of a dog seeing something and taking off. Just me. I had a client once that wanted me to take their dog out the front door to get the morning paper so he could go to the bathroom. And I said, do you take him out on a leash? He goes, no, he won't go to the bathroom on a leash. I said, I'm not the right sitter for you. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I'm sorry. If a dog is outside in an unsecured area, they're on a leash. And I said, I don't think I'm going to be the right pet sitter for you. So, and they didn't see that as, this guy is thinking with his head and he's thinking about safety. They saw that as me judging them. And, I don't judge people. Look, if this is what you do, fine, but it's not going to happen on my watch. I know that sounds very selfish, but as a professional pet sitter, I'm here to provide professional quality pet care. And your pet safety and your home safety needs to be first and foremost. And my safety too, because believe me, I'm not getting any younger. If something happens to me, I'm no good to anybody. And asking me to walk a reactive dog or a dog who doesn't have leash manners, no. And I know my area that there are a lot of people that think it's okay to walk their dog off leash because they have a friendly dog. Not all dogs are friendly. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to encounter that where I may have a dog that may be friendly to me, but may be protective of me too. That if I'm out on a walking trail and someone on a bike sneaks up behind us, or a skateboard, or a jogger, I don't want to expose myself to that dog biting, because then there's a third party involved. And we've talked about this on previous interviews when we've talked about safety and liability. That also is part of our complacency, that, I don't think a lot of people see the risks involved with just taking every job that comes along. And I realize we're in a situation where people need to make money, but taking a job just for the paycheck, that's complacency to me, because you're not doing your own due diligence.
Have you heard of Time to Pet? Doug from Bad to the Bone Pet Care has this to say.
Time to Pet has made managing my team and clients so much easier. Our clients love the easy-to-use app and scheduling features, and our sitters love being able to have all of their information organized and easily accessible. My favorite feature is the instant messaging. By keeping conversations on Time to Pet, we are able to monitor our team and ensure nothing ever falls through the cracks.
If you're looking for new pet sitting software, give Time to Pet a try. Listeners of our show will save 50% off your first 3 months by visiting timetopet.com/confessional.
And, this is definitely a different way of thinking about business. Is this something that you have always done, or did you have something happen in the beginning days that kind of made it click and go, oh, maybe I need to approach this in a different way?
Yes. One of them was when I updated my third-party liability to my contract. I mean, granted, I could have a client acknowledge that if anyone else has access to your home while you're gone, I don't assume liability. Will it hold up in court? Maybe. Here's their initials. They acknowledged it. But, contracts are only as good as what the paper they're written on, right? I mean, better to have one than not. But will it hold up in court? I don't know. But that's one of the things I make. They initial it at my meet and greet on my contract. I have bullet points that go, read it and let's discuss it. But yes, so that was when I was taking care of a beautiful chocolate lab, and she was crated between visits, and, they were gone for long hours a day. So being new to the industry, and I'm like, wow, you only want 2 visits and she's crated every 12 hours. That's a long time, but if that's what she was used to, I said, okay, I'll do a morning and an evening. And I went for my second visit one day, and the dog wasn't in her crate. The back door was open a little bit, and every book in a lower shelves of a bookcase were chewed up and shredded. And she was sitting there with the biggest smile on her face, like, hey, look what I did. And I'm like, all right, who was here? I know she was in her crate, because I'm one of those people that I will go back and check to make sure a crate door is locked, or even a back door is locked, because I pull on it, I'm sure we all do things that we don't even realize we're doing it, when we leave a client's home. And I'm like, all right, I said, something's not right. So I called the parents, and they said, oh, yeah, we asked our neighbor to come over and let her out midday. And I'm like, well, can you talk to your neighbor and find out if she was here today or someone else was here today? The neighbor sent her kid over when he got home from school. He was like a 9 or 10-year-old kid. And I'm like, this is not good. So that's when I had an aha moment about, nope, you know what? No one other than myself, I'm not going to assume liability. I mean, I cleaned up the mess, and I told them that. And they were a little offended by that. And I said, look, I'll finish out the job. I said, I love your dog, but I'm not going to do this anymore. It's either going to be me or, you can have your neighbor take care of it. And then you heard the story at the conference, the wild ride theme. That was another just eye-opening, experience for me about a client just not being honest with me. And, I think, we talk about being transparent and honest with our clients, but are they honest and transparent with us? Had I known that they were going to stop giving that dog his medication prior to their trip, I would have said, look, if you don't want this dog any longer, I'll be more than happy to take him and let him live out his life with me. Give me, but they just decided on themselves. And I know there's people listening that aren't familiar with the story, but the Evelyn Wood version is a client stopped giving a dog his medication about a week before they went on their trip. And he had congestive heart failure, and I showed up for 2 visits one day, and he was fine. And the 3rd visit, he had passed away. And the clients, were not honest with me about any of that. And, it was just, it was another gut-wrenching experience. We think on our feet, and, I had other bedtime visits to do, and there were other pets in the home that needed to be cared for. And, again, this is something, are we prepared to walk in for that? No. And I hope anybody listening to this never, ever, ever has to deal with that. I just hope and pray that you can be in your business and never have to deal with a pet that's passed in your care. But when someone tells you, I have a thing on my intake form about special diet, special medical needs, any of that. And, when they go, no, 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 no. And I'm like, okay. And then when I find out that they lied to me, I'm like, is that an ideal client? Because what would have happened if I, as the pet sitter, let's flip this around, or you as the pet sitter, or one of your team members, again, got complacent and just said, Spencer didn't want his pill tonight. I'll just start up again in the morning. Well, by him not getting that pill at night, what would you have found in the morning? And then, well, again, when was the last time he got his medicine? Oh, I forgot to give it to him last night. Again, do you document that? I have a medication sheet that I leave on the counter when I take care of pets with medications, and the time of day, the medicine, the dose, and a little check mark. Did they get AM? Did they get PM? Especially insulin or that's for me. And then I leave it for the client saying, okay, this is when, Max got his meds, or this is when Fluffy got her insulin. Or, a lot of times we come into a job where a dog is on an antibiotic and we finish the antibiotic out, right? I always save the empty pill bottle and I turn it upside down and I put a note and say, okay, this is the day we gave. And I don't like clients when they leave pill bottles on the counter. I always put them up in a cupboard somewhere. Just because if there's a cat in the house, they always knock the damn bottles off.
They're really good at that. Yeah.
And the dog tries to eat the whole bottle of the pill. Yeah. But again, these are things. Do you look around? I mean, I know I'm all over the place here, but these are things that we get so complacent, and I don't want to say lazy, but we get into such a routine that, are you looking around? Are there things that could be a potential hazard? And pill bottles are first and foremost. I had just finished a job with a client. They have 5 cats. I got to their house for the first visit, and on their little end table, they had 2 bags of open Dove chocolates sitting there. I'm going, all it was going to take for one of these cats was to knock a bag over, and they would have had a ton of little hockey pucks, right? Now, whether they would have eaten it, probably not, because they were foil wrapped, but there would have been chocolates all over the house. I just picked those suckers up and put them in the pantry. I said, oh, hell no. But are we aware of what's going on in our environment? And our environment changes all day, every day. You know what I mean? These are things that, but getting back to the honesty and all of that, it's a two-way street. And if you ask a client something and they answer you, you have to make sure you feel 100% comfortable that they're giving you the right answer. But if they also give you an answer that you're not comfortable with, you need to make a decision. Is it worth the risk? Or do I really need, the money for the couple of visits? And I understand a lot of times, solo business owners, they're a one-man band. They may not have a spouse or significant other where it's their income and they've got to pay their rent or their mortgage and their health insurance. And I understand, but, not every client is your ideal client. And I think, we talk about that a lot. And if you can have a client list of ideal clients, I think you stand less of a risk of any issues by keeping that line of communication open, whether it be in written form through a pet sitting software, whether it be, I know a lot of pet sitters, old school pet sitters like myself, have a notebook at clients' homes that they write a little update for their midday clients about, what they did and what did or didn't come out of the dog at that visit, or and that's fine. But as long as you're communicating. Now, that said, if the client isn't reading that or isn't going into your software to update things or check your updates at a visit, there's only so much you can do as the business owner or the pet sitter or dog walker. You know what I'm saying? But
Mm-hmm.
I think your standard operating procedures need to be implemented and in effect every day, all day, every day. And, we talk a lot about SOPs and this and that, and, but is your team following those procedures? Am I as a solo business owner, you like when we get off this interview, I've got my midday visits to do, and there's 4 of them today, and one of them is a dog that needs to be fed in a Bailey chair. Okay. I need to be on my game to make sure I time everything. Her first pill, and then there's a 3-minute wait once she's in the chair, and then she can eat, and then there's a 6-minute wait before she can drink a thickened small amount of water. Okay. And then there's a 10-minute wait before she can be released from the Bailey chair. So there's a whole process there. If I got complacent with her visit, I could screw that up, and then she could swallow something. She could aspirate. She can, God forbid she starts choking while she's eating. I got to take her out of the chair. There's a whole process. Again, that's something that I wasn't sure if I was able to take that on. Like, did I want to assume that liability or responsibility? But I've known this dog for years. She's comfortable with me. The pet parents are comfortable with me. And I said, let me try it. I said, I'll be 100%, 110% honest with you if I don't feel comfortable doing it. And so basically, I go a couple of times a week for her. When they need to be away from the house, because one of them can work from home from time to time. So, they need someone there at lunchtime. And yeah, I'm more than happy to do it. But I had to make sure I was 150% comfortable doing something like that. But I also take care of dogs that are victims of IVDD that have had the surgery. Some have been successful, some haven't, but they need to have their bladders expressed. Okay, that's something that I won't give a cat sub-Q fluids, but I don't have a problem squeezing a bladder. It's like there's just certain things that, but the vets in the area know that, and they give my name out, and these dogs that need to have their bladders expressed, I love them like they're my own, and I've known them for years, and there's just things that come up. That, again, if I was complacent in my care for these dogs that needed to have their bladders expressed, that could create a problem. If I, if I missed a step feeding Bella, in the Bailey chair, that could lead to a whole medical problem. So we need to be on our game, and again, in the mix of doing 3 other midday visits today, where one requires a walk, one doesn't, one is losing his sight, so it's kind of out in the yard on a leash. Let's just sniff and do your business, and yet, each one has its little idiosyncrasy. You know what I mean? Like each pet is different in each home. One's a huge English bulldog. He can't be out in the heat all that long. And he likes to go outside and literally lay on the hot concrete and warm himself up. And I'm like, dude, we need to go in, but we have a routine. He rolls over, I rub his belly, and then I say, okay, come on, let's go inside. But you need to know your dog breeds. You need to know their quirks. And, it's still pretty hot here in Houston, for October. And I don't want to put that dog in harm's way of him being, exposed to the heat, of course, with his smushy face, but there's not one house I visit today where I would call it a plain vanilla visit where, you just walk the dog or you just let the dog out, or, there's something with each pet in each house that I have to pay attention to. And do we on a daily basis?
Yeah, that links back. That's probably not, for being honest, but like that's where that you mentioned that documentation is so important, and you walk through basically three big areas of where we have to document, and so like you have to document first and foremost your comfort level of what you are willing to not do, and where those boundaries are for you. Documenting your policies, what you're supposed to be doing, what's your standard, and then documenting your actions. And I love that you mentioned that too, of here's what I did on what day and in what order I did, and here's the day the pill bottle ran out, and here's the day that I moved this, or here's like that kind of documentation really points back to something, because I know for me, my first instinct for all of those, my comfort level, my policies, or my actions, is like, oh, I'll remember it. My brain is perfect. I will remember all of these things, but I have to remember that my brain is like a steel trap, but it's rusted shut, and it's hard to get things back out. And so, and especially if it's like, okay, am I going to remember all this in a week's time, in a month's time? No. And that's where we start to slip. Things become inconsistent, and then and then it's harder to keep up.
And again, I think proper screening, the communication and documentation from the get-go. And I know we talked about this on the last time we spoke for a podcast, was about, someone filling out a client information sheet and a pet information sheet. And I think you had a situation where someone had said, you would question about, does your dog have a bite history or aggression or this or that? And they had commented to be discussed in person. Like, how is that not a big red flag? Like, no, that's something we're going to discuss now, not like put it off till the meet and greet. Like, why even do that if there's going to be a potential problem, right? And I think that also is I'm painting with a very broad paintbrush here. I'm not saying every pet sitter does this, every pet business does this, but I think in 20 years, and I want to say in the last few years, I've seen it more and more where it's, I don't want to say the Scarlett O'Hara thing, well, tomorrow is another day, I'll do it tomorrow. But, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If you see a red flag, don't say I'll deal with it at the meet and greet, or don't say I'll deal with it later. You need to deal with it now, because that will bite you in the ass. And excuse the three-letter word there, but, we want to avoid getting bitten by a pet. We don't want to get bit in the ass by a client, not being honest. And we've all been there. We've all been there. And it's not a good place to be. It's not a good place to be. And, it's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence. It is. And people don't want to say no because they're afraid, I'll get a bad review. Well, how can someone give you a bad review for saying, no, I'm not available to take care of your dog? Or, no, I'm not comfortable asking or doing what you're asking me to do. To me, that makes you a professional. Again, if you're in this industry just for a paycheck, you're in the wrong industry, because we pet sitters are a breed unto ourselves. We work crazy hours. We work holidays. We make so many personal sacrifices to do what we do. We don't work. We don't get paid. We don't get vacation pay. I don't know what you offer your team, as far as, any type of benefit, but I would imagine most of the businesses with the team don't have quote unquote full-time employees that are working 40 hours a week that'll get overtime and paid sick days and holidays. Mm-hmm. Most people are hiring part-time people to avoid that, to stay profitable. But that's out of my wheelhouse. But again, there's so much we can do to avoid complacency, and another C word is consistency. If you're consistent, you won't get complacent. And I know in the past I always talked about the S word, simple. Well, consistency is part of my keeping things simple plan. It's part of my standard operating procedures. You know what I mean? I handle each client exactly the same way for intake, for meet and greet, for communication, and then documentation, depending on what documentation is needed. Again, what the client's preferences are. You guys can go into your software and do a visit update after every visit, whether the client chooses to read it or not. You can't control that. You can't control that. But again, if there's a situation that arises, do you have the client's permission to reach out to them directly? That a text message or a phone call might be like, oh, wow, Colin they may be a problem. Or when do you know when the right time is to make that phone call? And again, pet sitting software is wonderful, but you need to use it to your benefit. And just putting something in the software where a client may or may not read it could lead to a potential problem. And I think we need to know when it's right to notify the client. No one wants to spoil their vacation, or God forbid they had to go out of town for a funeral or a wedding, or they have a new grandbaby or whatever. But again, if there's a potential risk to their house or their pet, you say, look, I just observed this. Is there something I should do? Or, my intake form, I get an HVAC company, a plumber, an electrician, who do you use? Do you have a service contract? I mean, it gets hot here. If someone's AC goes out in the middle of August or September, it's hot. I can't fix it, but if I can call someone and say, hey, the Funkhausers are out of town. I'm watching their dogs, and, they asked me to give you a call. I mean, I'll be more than happy to meet you here if you can come here. And in the interim, I'll have them touch base with you. Or you'll call your HVAC company and say, hey, Scott, my pet sitter can meet you, blah, 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 blah. What time can you be there? I'm willing to do that for a client as long as it's feasible. But I don't want dogs in a hot house, because then it becomes my problem. I mean, if they're not going to come home or they can't get home to fix it, it's like a plumbing issue. And again, it's natural disasters. It's not just a house thing. We might get complacent in living in Houston. I've dealt with a lot of stuff in 20 years, hurricanes and freezes and floods, and situations where I wasn't able to leave my own subdivision where I live because of water, or trees down, or wires down, or icy roads, which you would never think we'd have icy roads in Houston, right? And people can't drive here when it's 80 degrees and sunny, yet alone when there's a little bit of ice on the road. Thank God I grew up in New Jersey. I learned how to drive in the ice and snow. But still, what risks am I putting myself at trying to get to a client's home? And we need to think about that. And I know we had talked or had communicated about some issues, and about disaster preparedness is key. Take a class on disaster preparedness. I know it's offered through some of the pet sitting organizations. Take a pet first aid and CPR class. Okay, none of us are veterinarians, or dietitians or obedience trainers. Or not. Let me back that up. I'm sorry. Some pet sitters may be vet techs. Some might have also be obedience trainers. Some may have taken classes on nutrition. But I think sometimes we step out of our lane when a client asks us about something. And, I always say you should talk to your vet, or have you worked with an obedience trainer about this problem? I can share my opinion, but I think some pet sitters are so quick to, I don't want to say practice veterinary medicine or offer legal advice, or we're not attorneys, we're not accountants, we're not veterinarians. And, I could always say, in my experience, I have taken care of pets. I have had personal pets, like, having my blind deaf dog, Chato, who I lost in June. That dog, for a dog that couldn't see, he opened my eyes to so many things. And I think it's made me a better pet sitter. Because now, as I'm caring for more senior dogs that are losing their hearing or losing their sight, Or when someone says, I have a deaf dog, and I go, and okay, cool. Can your dog see me? So these are things that, are we okay with something like that? Because if you're not, don't take the job. I mean, there's so many things we can say yes to and not be comfortable with, and then you regret it. And again, does that happen because we're just complacent and saying, well, yeah, I'd love to take care of your dog. And then you find out that the dog needs, multiple medications a day. Well, is your dog good about taking pills? No. Well, you know what? Will he take it in a pill pocket? No. Well, can I just put it on his food? No. Well, how do you give it to him? Well, we kind of have to cram it down his throat. And this is a 80-pound Rottweiler or a Doberman, or I hate to say it, our new little addition, Luna, is a little Chihuahua mix. Knock wood, I've been very lucky with Chihuahuas, but there's some crazy Chihuahuas out there. I ain't going to stick my hand down a dog's throat that's going to take my hand off. You know what I mean? Like, again, there's a liability there. Are you going to get bit trying to administer medication to this dog or cat? Again, it's a safety liability thing, and then you're opening yourself up to a bunch of by not asking the right questions up front, and again, by not asking is that because we just go through the motions? And do you know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I am one of these people. Someone once accused me of being a very negative person. And I said, really? And they said, well, you always look at worst case scenario. I said, yeah, worst case to best case. So I'm prepared. And when I do a meet and greet and when I talk to clients, they say, God, you're so thorough. I said, God, how long have you lived in Kingwood? My service area. I said, how many hurricanes have we dealt with over the last 15 years? We had a freeze. We had a flood. We had this. I said, I've had people out of town that couldn't get home, and I had to try to get to these pets. Believe me, I'm prepared. I'm an I dotted T crossed kind of guy. And having an emergency contact is great. But if you're in the middle of a hurricane, they may be dealing with their own problems. You know what I mean?
Hi, this is Beth at Pet Sitters International. The pet sitting industry is growing fast, and so is the need for professional pet care providers like you. Whether you're just starting out or scaling a multi-team company, you don't have to figure out everything alone. Since 1994, PSI has helped thousands of pet care professionals like you build reputable, profitable, and sustainable businesses. If you're thinking about joining, visit petsit.com/PSC to learn more and get a special promo code.
We've thought about that a lot too, of what really is the role of that emergency contact. Like really, like under what circumstances, not just do we, but can we contact that person? And then in the event where, for us, we get a lot of tornadoes, extreme bad weather, and ice here in the Midwest. So it's going, okay, like if I can't get there unless the emergency contact is the literal next door neighbor, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to get over there anyway. So then you have to ask, what's the next plan? And I will say that kind of multi-level and continual thinking can definitely feel like a burden. I know Megan and I have had the experience where, especially whenever we've got a lot going on and we're tired and we're kind of getting burned out, we'll ask ourselves, is this always our job? Right? Do we always have to be the people who are thinking of the third thing and the fourth thing and then the fifth thing? And do we have to be the ones going with the questions and asking about the notes and reviewing things and every time we come back down to the point of the answers, yes. Yeah. That is our role as professional pet sitters, to keep our promises to our team, to our employees, to our clients, to their pets. That falls to us to do because that's what the client is wanting from us.
Okay. And no, I agree. And a good friend of mine, a fellow pet sitter who's probably got 30 years experience in the business. We always talk about keeping the P in professional pet sitting because sometimes it disappears from time to time. And I think what you were saying is yes. Is it your responsibility? Yeah, it comes down to what being a professional pet care provider is, or a professional dog walker. And I know within the last week, PSI came out with these global standards, and I actually listened to your Megan's podcast yesterday. I loved it. But I read through this, and I'm going, yeah. I've been doing this for 20 years, but if you look at that and you say, these are things that will help me not be complacent. These are the things that will keep me that'll keep my head in the game. That if I take something like you guys said, if you're at 80% there, how do you get to 90% or 100%? You take one item and you go, okay, when you get to 100%, you move on to the next one. I've said for years that, regulation is good and bad. I'm kind of a guy, the glass half empty, half full. I see both sides of it. But I do think that, credentials are very important to me. Not every person is going to be a member of an organization. Not every pet sitter is going to take pet first aid and CPR. Not every pet sitter is going to become a certified professional pet sitter through an organization, whether it be PSI or NAPS. I think it's wonderful that they offer that to their members, and I highly recommend it. But having, certain criteria and certain credentials, I have a presentation notebook. And when I meet with clients, after we do all the paperwork, I said, okay, here's my time to brag a little bit. And I said, when we spoke, you went to my website, you saw all of my credentials listed there. I said, but here's proof. Here's, my proof of insurance. Here's my current. I run a background check on myself. Okay. Do I need to? No, but I want them to know that I have a clear criminal background. I show them my pet first aid training, a certificate that I do take every 2 years. A lot of pet sitters take it once and think they're certified for life. They're not. And again, in my opinion, you're trained. You're not certified. You're trained it's a certificate of training. You're not certified. But that's my little pet peeve. No, seriously.
Yeah.
You're not going to take a 5 or 6 hour class and be certified in anything. You want to teach pet first aid, and you'll be certified to be an instructor over the course of many days of training. But you're not going. You're going to be trained, to the what you need to do to administer first aid or get a pet to the vet safely. But I take it every 2 years for my own pets and for my clients' pets. Knock wood, I've never had to do CPR, and I hope I never have to. But that has taught me, whether it be Arden or Denise or a pet tech instructor, the one thing I've learned through all the years of taking pet first aid and CPR is to take a step back, assess the situation, and go, okay, what do we do? And that's something that I think I just do without thinking now. I walk into a client's home and I go, something's different. You know what I mean? Or you look around, or, a cat that always comes to greet you at the door doesn't. Or speaking of that, here's a situation where there might be multiple pets in the house. You haven't been there in a few months, and then you're looking for the third cat and you can't find it, and you contact the client and say, oh yeah, Fluffy died 6 months ago. Well, thanks for letting me know. Again, communication. And that's something that when a client books, is everything still the same? I mean, I don't know if, again, not having software, when a client books, when you do the when you confirm the appointment or the booking, is there a way for you to put in there, is everything still the same with Fluffy and Rover and da-da-da-da, where it gives them the opportunity to say, oh, Colin, we're so sorry. We forgot to tell you, Fluffy passed away, or something like that. Again, we get complacent. We take the booking and we know that there's always been 5 pets in that house. And then you show up and there's 4 and you're looking under beds and in closets and doors that are closed. And then you come to find out that the pet has passed. And again, that stinks for so many reasons, because we never get closure with that pet, the compassion fatigue, I wish I had known, I would have sent a card or offered something, or, that's who we are, no matter how you slice it. That's who we are. Our hearts, we think with our hearts a lot of times more than our head. And I think we there are times we have to think with our heads, to be good at our business and be good at what we do. But we also need to, I don't think any of us would be doing this if we didn't have a passion for animals. I tell people, through the years, this has become more of an avocation than an occupation for me. And I know I mentioned this in other interviews, but, I got into this because a dog came into my life years ago, when I was not in a happy place. I was in a job that made me ill, and I had to take some time off, and this dog came into my life, and she was the best medicine that anyone, no pill bottle was going to give me that. You know what I mean? And through her, I started to volunteer with a rescue, and through the rescue was how my pet sitting started. So my Domino, she's no longer with us, but she inspired me in 2003 to think about pet sitting. And in 2005, July 1st of 2005 is when I opened my doors, and it's been 20 years now. And that spotted pain in the butt is to blame for it. But you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. And we all get into this for different reasons. I know we all say, oh, we love pets, but we need to also think about the human side of this. And I look, I'm 62. I'm very old school. I didn't have a lot of what is being offered today when I started. PSI was there, thank God. Patty Moran's, Pet Sitting for Profit was there, thank God. And I slowly, started my business and figured things out on my own. But so much has changed in 20 years. But the one thing that I always, my mission statement was always quality pet care for the animals and peace of mind for the pet parents. And that's something I never strayed from. And complacency, that's something I think about, that if I don't give 100% or more at every visit, am I sticking to my mission? And that could be getting lazy or getting complacent or I mean, this bulldog that I'm going to go visit today, I send an update, a photo to his parents every day when they're at work, and they look forward to it, because I always take the most obscure pictures of this dog doing the strangest things, and then I have a thing on my phone where I can edit it and put little cartoon bubbles over their heads and put something in there, and they just laugh and they, thank you for capturing this, or they look forward to it. They look forward to it. And again, it's a way of communicating that I was there, that the dogs are happy. So the pets are happy, the people are happy, I'm happy. And that's also something that I think we need to look at going into taking a new client. I call it a 3-way comfort level. You and Megan bring me in, or I go and do a meet and greet with you guys. And, my thing is, okay, are you guys okay with me? Are your dog or dogs okay with me? And am I okay with the dogs and being in your home? I'm sure you've been in some homes where you just don't feel comfortable being there, whether it be they're not tidy or they should have velvet ropes because the dog can't go here, the dog can't go there, you can't go here, you can't go there. I have a question on my intake form, are there areas of the home that are off limits to the pets or pet sitter? Because, everybody's got cameras now, and I'm okay with it. I wish every house had cameras everywhere, because I'm not a nosy person by nature. But, if something that doesn't sound right or look right, I'm going to check it out. And I want their permission to do that. I mean, I had a client years ago, and I may have shared this with you, but when I asked this question, they said, well, I don't care if my house is on fire. Please don't ever go in that room. And of course, inquiring minds want to know, okay, what's behind the door now?
Yeah.
And ironically, and you could edit this out if you want, but it was right around 50 Shades of Grey time. And I'm thinking, what's behind there? Like, is there a red room back there, or do they have a meth lab or something? And this was a client that I thought was going to become a longtime client, but they were a one and done. And then I'm thinking, maybe they were part of the witness protection plan or something. They just weren't there long. But, it makes you think, like, what's behind that door? And, I just do that because I want to make sure. And believe me, I've discovered leaks. In Texas, sadly, they put water heaters in our attics. We don't have basements. Everything's built on a slab. Why you would put something that holds gallons of water up where if there's a leak, it's going to drip down, right? But I've discovered leaks, things coming from water leaking into a bedroom with carpet, and the carpet's absorbing the thing. And then before you know it, it's seeping into the subfloor. And then I'm in the house and water's dripping from a recessed light into the kitchen. And I go in there and go, did you pee? Did the dog pee on the kitchen floor? And then you go to clean it up and you're getting water dripped on your head. It's like, hey, I want to go check this out. Been there, done that. And again, it's not your fault. It could happen. It's happened in my own house where we had a leak, a tiny little pinhole leak in a pipe that was wrapped, for insulation, that the water built up, and before you know it, it came through one of our recessed lights in our entry foyer. And I'm like, I can't fix it, but I could stop it from getting worse. Do you know what I'm saying? And these are things that, if you don't ask the right questions, and I think thorough screening. And like I said earlier, people have told me, you're very thorough. I said, it's my job to be. And again, I don't have a magic wand that I can make your dog eliminate every midday. Hopefully they'll do it while I'm there, but I don't have a magic wand. If your AC goes out, yes, if I can't get a hold of you, I know who to call. Okay. It can hopefully prevent it from getting worse. If you're a pool, like I don't take on any, I will throw a chlorine puck in someone's skimmer basket or empty a skimmer basket if it's very leafy, or things are falling. And we have these huge pine trees here, so we get the pine straw that falls. I'll be more than happy to empty a skimmer basket. But when it comes to any pool stuff, if they don't have a pool service, I'm out. I don't want that liability. I don't want that liability. I had a situation during Hurricane Ike. We were without power for 2 weeks. Client was out of town and they refused to come home. They're no longer a client for many reasons, but they refused to come home until power came back. And I, cleaned out 2.5 refrigerators for them so things wouldn't get stinky, and, kept up with their pool, because I figured if power came back on overnight and the pool pump kicked on, and there was all this debris in the pool, I never got so much as a thank you. But, these are things that, we can say not my responsibility. But if I'm there with the dogs and they're out in the yard and, they're tired of being in the house, and believe it or not, it was cooler outside than it was inside during some of these power outages, that I said, let me just, skim the pool a little bit and get rid of some of the branches and, just to prevent it. I guess it's just who I am. It just seemed like the right thing to do. But when it comes to anything mechanical, I'm out. Like, nope. I'm not a trainer. I'm not a vet. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not, a pool tech or an HVAC guy or a plumber. But if there's anything I can do to prevent the situation from getting worse, this is the time to tell me who I call, where can I find this? Where's the main water cutoff in the house? I had that during that hard freeze we had, where a pipe broke and there was water coming in through someone's guest bedroom ceiling fan. I went in there, and thank God the water was hitting the mattress, but I ended up getting hit on the head by a piece of sheetrock that fell from the ceiling, and had a very anxious golden retriever. But I knew where the dog towels were, and I created a little barrier and called the client, and they had friends come over and they helped me clean it up. And, again, what do you do? What do you do? But I knew the house well enough to where the main water cutoff was, where the pool towels were for the dogs, and just did what I had to do. It's, sometimes we need to think outside the box and be prepared. And that's something that, again, if being prepared every time you turn the key and walk into a client's house, that'll help us be the best we can be and not be so complacent. Again, consistency is key, I think, in our industry. Yes, we want to mix things up. It would be very boring if we did the same exact thing in every house. And to me, each house is different. I have a consistency plan for each house I go to, because no two pets are the same. No two houses are the same. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's, Fluffy Kitty may be a lap cat, but, Rosy Kitty might just sit there and look at you and go, "Don't move because I'm going to cut you." You know what I mean? But you know that ahead of time. So you sit there and toss her treats or play with her cat dancer. And that's your consistency with that cat. Yeah. Another cat is they're going to fight you for the couch, and they're going to jump in your lap before you even sit down. That's your consistency with that cat. Or the dog that is going to drop and roll or bring you a toy, or, that to me, when I talk about consistency in our visits, yes, be consistent, but it's always nice to mix things up a little bit, as long as you're not creating a problem for the pet parent, for the pet, or for yourself, or in a case where you guys have a team where, Sally's coming in the morning and Scott's coming for dinner, and Scott's going to be like, okay, Charlie didn't do this yesterday at dinner time. Is something going on here that I missed?
Right.
Or, and again, I know a lot of businesses with teams. I hear you guys talk about Slack and other things that are available for you guys to communicate amongst yourselves. But again, is that being communicated? You know what I mean? Or is the sitter, like, if it was me, is it my responsibility to contact you or Megan and say, "Hey, I'm at the Smith's house, and, Charlie's acting really weird. He wasn't like this yesterday at dinner. Did something happen this morning that I need to know about?" Or, did, let's say you did, whoever did the morning visit, did they reach out to you and say that Charlie was acting weird? Or again, I don't know what your procedures are, but again, that could be just say, "Oh, well, maybe it's just a one-off, and, let's see how he is later." Or is there something that the morning person may have missed or just didn't communicate? And I'm not saying that to be like stirring the pot, but, communication, it works between the client and the business, and then communication within the business. Yeah. Where if you don't communicate that, are you failing the client, or are you failing in your position as a pet sitter for this pet sitting company? And again, it's I'm painting this with a very broad paintbrush. I'm not accusing people of doing this, but we've seen it time and time again in the pet sitter groups. And what should I do? Or have any of you ever experienced this? And I think it all comes down to, at the end of the day, consistency, communication, transparency, honesty. If you can't do that, you might not be in the right industry. And again, I don't mean that as an insult, and I don't mean that to think that I have a chip on my shoulder. those, you know me well enough. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm a smart aleck and I'm a cut up but I think 20 years in, I'm very, like I said, compassionate. I'm very passionate about this industry, and I don't want to see it go down the garden path to hell. You know, I don't see Rover and WAG as competition because, you know, they're just, you know, I don't, I'm very fortunate that I don't have that. I mean, I don't see it, you know, taking business away from me. What I see taking business away from me are the next stores. You know, oh, I'm looking for a pet sitter. Oh, my daughter can pet sit, or, you know, and I just go on there and say, you know, if you're looking for a pet sitter, I try to educate people always and just say, you know what, make sure, you know, your pet sitter has credentials. Because I don't go in as, you know, I have a business page on Nextdoor, but I also have a personal thing, and I will just go in and say, look, I highly recommend that if you're looking for a pet care provider, that you use a professional that has credentials, and I will give the link to PSI, you know, to petsit.com or NAPS. You know, I'm not a NAPS member, but I know there are people that are members of both or one or the other. So I want to give anybody the opportunity to find a professional pet care provider. You know, but you know, there's just so many things that you know that this complacency or safety and liability or avoiding the oh no's or however you want to call this, you know, this can be a 2, 3, 4 part, you know, interview but you know, I guess I just see more of it on a daily basis in social media. And maybe I spend too much time on social media, you know, but I want to be able to help people, but there's days I don't understand how someone could have let something happen. And I'm not saying that as an insult. A lot of what we do is common sense. And I tell people, you know, what I do is not rocket science. The science is making it happen all day, every day, because no 2 days are the same. And, you know, like today, my middays are different. You know, I've got a dog that needs to be fed in a Bailey chair. Tomorrow, I won't visit her. So my day is different tomorrow. You know, it's, you know, or, you know, are my bedtime visits tomorrow going to be the same as they are on Thursday or Friday? Or, you know, you start, you stop, you continue, and it's very easy to go through the motions. And I think we need to be more than just businesses that go through the motions to achieve a bottom line or to achieve, you know, it's more than a paycheck. And I'm sure, you know, before you and Megan hired, when it was just yourselves, you realized, you know, this is a lot of work. And then you're raising a family and you're doing this and you're doing that. And, you know, I don't think people really understand. When I say people, I mean, you know, people that don't think we have a real job. What it takes to run a small business, you know? And as a one-man band, you know, my challenges are different than yours. And I know people with teams, you know, hiring seems to be a big problem right now, is finding qualified people. You know, and in a way, I'm kind of glad I don't. That's one thing I don't have to worry about. Like I said earlier, you know, it's just me, and I'm okay with that. You know, am I going to grow? You know, huge? No, I'm not. But at 20 years in, I'm right where I want to be. Yes, would I like to start to continue to take new clients? Of course, but I'm going to continue to do it one client at a time, the way I always have. You know, and again, at this point, are they going to be my ideal client? And I think, you know, avoiding the oh no's is thoroughly screening, and whether it be by email, by text, by picking up the phone. You know, I'm not going to, you know, get on my soapbox about software or no software. But, you know, if they're filling out information and it's incomplete, you know, complacency. Are you going to let it slide, or are you going to see that red flag and say, okay, I need to address this before we move forward about even setting up a meet and greet, or if there's something that's again, if it doesn't look right, it's probably not right. And don't wait till it's too late. You get to a meet and greet and you have no exit strategy, or people agree to taking on a job before they know all the information. Or another thing I see is, again, this is on the oh no side, but pricing. Again, I'm not going to go down the argue. Do you put your rates on your website or not? There's two different schools. I think I would keep moving on if I went to someone's website that didn't have prices or starting at. That's just how I am as a consumer, whether it be for a plumber, a painter, an electrician, whatever. You go to someone's website, at least I want to know what the service call is going to charge, or, whatever. But if it just says call for info, I'm not going to call. But how many times have you seen, I'm taking on this job, and they've got 5 dogs and 3 cats and 2 bunnies, and I just don't know what to charge. Well, that's something you should have established already. If you start at X and that, that's something you discuss with the client and say, look, this is going to take more than my 30-minute visit, that we're going to need to add time, or this, I charge by my time. Don't not give don't wait to a meet and greet to give an estimate. The client, I would want to know up front what it's going to cost me. Because when I travel, Hale and I are doing a cruise in a couple weeks. Okay. First thing I had to factor in, I said, when are we leaving? When are we coming back? How many visits do we need for the dogs? And what is it going to cost for our sitter? That's part of my travel budget. I have to factor that in to I don't want to be told, and have sticker shock because, my pet sitter waited to the last minute to tell me what it was going to cost. And again, I know there's 2 schools. Like I charge X amount for 30 minutes of my time. It doesn't matter how many pets are in the house. Okay. If I can get everything done in 30 minutes, it's this. If I need to add 15 minutes, you get charged an additional price for, half of what my 30-minute visit is. Or if it's an hour, it's double my 30 minutes. I don't discount. I'm a straight shooter, very transparent. You know that, Mr. Cellophane. And you want an hour of my time, this is what it's going to cost you. And I think pet sitters need to be very upfront about that and not wait and say, well, let me think about it and get back to you. No, you should be able to say, hey, Colin, you've got, a menagerie, and, if the dogs don't need to be walked, if they need to be let out in the yard or whatever and fed, and the cats are here and there's multiple litter boxes, and, I always ask a client and say, well, how long does it take you normally to feed your dogs? I mean, that's one of my screening questions.
Right.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like just to get a ballpark idea that, well, if you can do it in 20 minutes, I could probably do it in 30 minutes. And it's not to say I won't be there for 35 minutes if I have to. I mean, I don't, I set a timer for every visit I do. But, there's days where they're not as busy as others. And if I've got a dog or a cat in my lap, I'm not just going to go, okay, get off. It's time to leave.
But it is part of setting those expectations, right? I think that's important when you ask the client that.
Well, and that's just it. To me, it's also good customer service. When you're starting, a possible relationship with someone, being very honest and transparent, and I know, like, I don't take care of farm animals, and I know there's a lot of people that take care of livestock and chickens, and, kudos to them, because, that's much more time consuming than your typical dog or cat visit or midday dog walk. And that's something that I would highly recommend that, that's something that a pet business may have to sit down and say, well, okay, for X number of horses or goats or chickens or, as far as what duties? Are you mucking stalls, or are you just going in and collecting eggs? You're going twice a day and opening a coop and feeding and letting the chickens out, and then going back before it gets dark to put them up at night and collecting eggs. You could probably do that in 2 30-minute visits where it wouldn't require extra time.
Right.
But are there other animals involved, or are there dogs and cats in addition to what's going on out in your backyard, or your chicken coop, or your hen house, or do you know what I'm saying? Like it's all, these are things that pet sitters need to be aware of, so they can present themselves to this client and say, well, what is the norm? How long does it take you to care for the chickens in the morning? How long does it take you to muck a stall? How long, what are your expectations of me? Because we need to price this accordingly. And I do have a price list, but I want to be fair in giving you an estimate or just telling you this is what it's going to cost. To me, an estimate in pet sitting is a slippery slope, because someone's going to come back and say, well, you said it was going to cost this. Well, and then you get there and you go, well, I didn't realize it was going to be this much work. You know what I mean? It's
an oh no that we can avoid by having that conversation up front.
Right. And of course, there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. Always.
Yeah.
It's like the last minute booking fee. Okay. I kind of look at it, and pet sitters will disagree with me on this, but I'm a one-man band, and maybe businesses with teams, you charge that last minute booking fee. Is more of an admin fee to make sure you can get them scheduled and get a sitter out there. I get it. But for me, to me, there's no amount of money that's going to make me more available if I'm not to take a last minute fee today for tomorrow. Now, that said, if it's an existing client and there's an emergency, of course you want to be there for them. But if it's just, hey, we're thinking of going, down to Galveston tomorrow, the weather looks nice, can you come? No, I if I'm not available, I'm not available. And to me, by charging you an extra $25 or $30 as a late booking fee is enabling a bad behavior. Because if Scott says yes and Colin sends me $30, and then 2 weeks later, Colin calls me and says, hey, can you we want to go back to whatever. Sure. What does it cost? It's your visit plus another $30. You send me the money, whatever. And then the one time you reach out to me and I say, no, Colin, I can't. You're going to be like, but I've paid you in the past and you've always said yes. To me, I just think I'm enabling a bad behavior. Because making someone pay for something that they think guarantees them a spot, at some point you're going to have to say no. And I just think that enables a bad behavior. I see it from both sides, where for a business with a team, yes, you need to make sure you have someone that can go there. And you're going to have to pay that person, and you want to make sure, I get it. But I'm a glass, again, half full, half empty on that. That I don't want to create a behavior, or it's a bad behavior. In my opinion, I've created a bad behavior that they think every time they do this, I'm going to say yes, and sometimes you just can't.
No. And you've got to be okay with that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to be okay with that in setting those boundaries. And you have to be okay with knowing that this is part of controlling the oh-nos. And right. I appreciate, the reminders that you've given of communicating early, staying consistent, but having that flexibility that you build in there. It allows you to take on or not what you can. And that just becomes part of that relationship that you've built with the clients. And as you have the good clients around you, it makes that process a little bit easier.
Oh, absolutely.
Because then it just kind of keeps rolling along there. But I know that, Scott, I want to thank you for coming on today and for sharing all of this and for encouraging us to focus on these and to look in our own businesses and how we run to make sure that we're taking care of our clients well, but also ourselves. So I know there's a lot here. For those who want to get connected with you, Scott, maybe pick your brain or ask some questions about this. Why not? How best can they do that and start, running a better balanced and making sure they don't have the oh-nos there?
I'm in quite a few pet sitting Facebook groups. PSI, Pet Sitters Forum, your group, the Robert Strickland's Next Level, and then there is a group out there, Pet Sitter Party of One for solo sitters that I'm a member of. But my email address is ptps@comcast.net. I have a personal Facebook page. You can message me. I'm an open book. You know that. I mean, I love working with other pet sitters, and it's funny. Like I said earlier, I would love to be able to help someone just starting out or has been in the industry for a while. But if there is something I can share that it took me 20 years to figure out, that I could save you the headache, in 2 or 3 years, I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody. The great thing about our business is there's no right or wrong way to run your business. However, as long as you're doing things that are going to keep, your clients safe, the pets safe, their property safe, and of course, protect yourself as the business owner. We're not robots. We don't want to do everything the same way all day, every day. And I don't want to contradict myself about the consistency, but, I think being consistent helps avoid complacency, and also consistency in the way you screen your clients, communicate to your clients, to your team, to whoever, avoid some of the oh-nos that could cause too much exposure and a safety or liability situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Scott, yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today. And it's always a pleasure getting to talk with you.
No, thank you, Colin.
If you're consistent, you won't get complacent. Consistency is what keeps our head in the game. It's what keeps us performing at a high level every single day. What support structures do you have to keep yourself consistent? What boundaries have you placed in your life? What policies, procedures, tools, and resources are you utilizing to make sure that every phone call, every text message, every update, every photo, every interaction and touch point with you is consistent? Or how you hold the leash, how your team does that. When we are consistent, it truly, genuinely shows that we care. If we truly care about the outcome, the quality, the sincerity of what we do, we'll put in the work to be consistent. Don't forget, this episode is eligible for 1 CEU credit from both PSI and NAPS. So now that you've listened, go to the show notes, click the link, take the quiz, get the email. We want to thank today's sponsors, Time to Pet and Pet Sitters International, for making this show possible. And we also want to thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll be back again soon.